It was supposed to be a simple school field trip. On a chilly October morning in 1986, 15 children from Maple Creek Elementary climbed onto a yellow school bus, full of laughter and excitement. They were heading to a nearby nature reserve, just a short 2-hour drive away. 2 teachers and a familiar, well-liked bus driver were with them. It was a routine trip, the kind every school takes. But that day, something went terribly wrong. The bus never made it. The children never came home. And not a single person ever saw them again. No emergency call was ever placed. No sign of struggle was found. No tire tracks, no personal belongings, no wreckage. Just a sudden, complete disappearance. In the days that followed, search teams combed every forest trail and back road for miles. Helicopters scanned the treetops, divers searched rivers, and the FBI got involved. But despite the massive effort, nothing turned up. It was as if the bus had been swallowed whole by the earth. For the families, it was a nightmare without an end. Birthdays passed in silence. Classrooms had empty seats no one dared to fill. And year after year, the same question haunted everyone: how can an entire school bus vanish without a trace? For decades, the case remained unsolved. Rumors took the place of facts. Some blamed the wilderness. Others whispered about something more sinister: people, secrets, cover-ups. But eventually, the world moved on. The case faded into old headlines, becoming a local legend, something talked about quietly, with sadness, confusion, and fear. Then, 39 years later, something happened. A construction crew surveying land on the edge of Fairvale County made a strange discovery buried deep beneath the soil. At first, they thought it was an old storage unit. But the faded yellow paint, the rounded edges, and the unmistakable shape revealed the truth. It was the school bus. Still sealed. Still hidden. And suddenly, the silence of nearly 4 decades was broken. What happened to those children? Why was the bus buried? And what was found inside after all this time? After all these years, the mystery isn't over. It's just beginning. Back in 1986, Maple Creek was a quiet town, the kind of place where everyone knew each other by name. Families lived in the same homes for generations, and children played in the streets until the porch lights came on. It wasn't a place known for crime or fear. That's why the disappearance of those 15 children hit so hard. It didn't just take their kids, it shattered the trust and peace that held the town together. The day of the field trip had started like any other. The kids had packed lunches, notebooks, and disposable cameras. Parents waved from driveways as the bus pulled away, and no one had a reason to worry. The destination was the Fairvale Nature Reserve, just under 2 hours from the school. The teachers had planned a full day of outdoor learning, bird watching, plant identification, and lunch by the river. The bus was last seen passing through County Road 12 at 9:17 a.m., according to a gas station security camera. After that, nothing. No eyewitnesses. No sightings. It was as if the road had simply erased them. The investigation that followed was one of the largest the state had ever seen. Law enforcement brought in helicopters, bloodhounds, and divers. Volunteers from across the county joined in, combing the woods and nearby lakes. Rumors spread quickly, talk of cults, kidnappers, secret tunnels, but none of it led to anything real. The bus driver, Mr. Harold Finch, had a spotless record. Both teachers were respected and deeply trusted in the community. And yet, they were gone, along with 15 innocent kids. Some families refused to give up. One mother drove the surrounding roads every weekend for years, convinced she'd find a piece of clothing or a scrap of the bus. Others moved away, unable to live with the memories. The school placed a plaque in the hallway with the names of the missing. Every year, on the anniversary, flowers would appear at the base of it. But as time passed, fewer people showed up. Grief quietly gave way to numbness. Now, with the bus finally found after 39 years, all the pain, confusion, and fear have come rushing back. The burial site was only 12 miles from where they were last seen. That close. All this time. Authorities are keeping details quiet, but one thing is clear, this wasn't an accident. The bus didn't end up underground on its own. So who buried it? And why? As news of the buried bus spread, Maple Creek was flooded with reporters, camera crews, and curious strangers who hadn't set foot in town for decades. For the families who had waited all these years, it was like ripping open a wound that had never healed. Questions poured in faster than answers. What was inside the bus? How had it been hidden so well? And most of all, how could it go unnoticed for nearly 40 years? The local sheriff's department released a short statement confirming the bus's identity but refused to comment on what, if anything, was found inside. That silence only fueled more speculation. Some said the bus was completely empty. Others whispered that something, or someone, had been found inside. Officials didn't confirm either version, leaving people to fill the gaps with theories. Among the voices returning to town was Emma Wallace, younger sister of Sarah Wallace, one of the missing children. Emma was only 4 years old when her sister disappeared, but she had never stopped digging. Now a freelance journalist, Emma came back not just as a grieving sibling, but as someone determined to uncover the truth. She believed the original investigation had missed something big. Her first question, who owned the land the bus was found on in 1986? That question led her to the Dalka family. Back then, the land was part of their large property on the edge of Fairvale Forest. The Dalkas were quiet, wealthy, and had always kept to themselves. The father, Marius Dalka, passed away in 2004, and his son Lucas inherited the land. When Emma tried to contact Lucas, he refused to speak. She wasn't the only one who had questions for him. Law enforcement had visited the Dalka property multiple times over the years, but nothing had ever stuck. Now, with the bus found so close, people were beginning to talk again. At the same time, a retired detective named Henry Mason came forward, claiming he had been pressured to drop a promising lead back in '87. He never said who pressured him, but his notes hinted at someone powerful, someone connected to both the school district and the local government. Mason had kept his files hidden for years, and now, he was ready to share them with Emma. But before their meeting could happen, Mason was found unconscious in his home after what officials called a fall. Something wasn't right. The silence around the bus wasn't just about shock, it felt controlled, as if someone still wanted this buried. But why, after all these years? Emma couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. Every time she left her motel room or visited another old address from the police files, the same black SUV appeared a few cars behind. It never followed too closely, just enough to remind her she wasn't alone. She didn't tell anyone, not even the other families she had reconnected with. Most of them were too scared to ask questions now. The discovery of the bus had reopened their grief, but it also reopened old fears. Some quietly admitted they wished the bus had never been found. Still, Emma kept going. She finally got a break when she found a retired janitor from the school who remembered something strange about the day of the trip. He said the bus left earlier than usual and didn't follow the typical route. He recalled the principal making a phone call just before the students boarded. His tone was panicked, not the usual cheerful send-off. Emma checked school records and found that the principal, Robert Haynes, resigned abruptly just a month after the children vanished. He moved out of state and hadn't been heard from since. But Emma managed to track him down. When she confronted him at his quiet home in Oregon, Haynes looked like he'd seen a ghost. He refused to speak on camera. But before slamming the door, he said one thing that chilled her to the bone. I told them not to go through Dalka's land. I told them. Emma returned to Maple Creek more certain than ever that the Dalkas were involved. But before she could follow up, something strange happened. Her motel room was broken into. Nothing was stolen, except her notes. Whoever did it had gone through her things with care. Her laptop was left untouched, but the handwritten journal she'd kept with interviews and timelines was gone. She reported it to the sheriff, but they dismissed it as a random theft. She didn't believe that. Neither did Henry Mason's daughter, who finally agreed to hand over her father's old files. Inside the box were case photos, maps, and a list of names, people who were questioned, and people who never were. One name was circled in red ink, Lucas Dalka. Emma knew she was running out of time. If someone had hidden the bus for almost 4 decades, they wouldn't stop now, not when the truth was this close. And if Lucas Dalka held the answers, she had to reach him before someone silenced him too. Emma managed to schedule a meeting with Lucas Dalka through a local lawyer who claimed to represent him. The arrangement was strange. She was instructed to meet him alone at the old Fairvale train depot, a place long abandoned and barely standing. It was late afternoon when she arrived, the sky already dimming. Lucas showed up 20 minutes late, wearing dark sunglasses and a heavy coat despite the heat. He looked tense, as if every movement was a calculated risk. He didn't greet her. Didn't shake hands. He just stood across from her and said, "I didn't bury the bus. But I know who did." Before she could ask anything else, Lucas handed her a flash drive and walked away without another word. Emma stood frozen, heart pounding. She knew she was in too deep now, but it was too late to turn back. Later that night, she opened the files on the drive. There were documents, old land transfers, school board communications, and a scanned letter dated just 1 week before the disappearance. It was a formal request from the school district, asking permission for the bus to cross through Dalka land to avoid construction on the main road. It was signed by someone Emma didn't expect, a man named Vincent Lane. Vincent Lane had been a school board member back then. But what Emma hadn't known, what no one had bothered to look into, was that he also owned a private logistics company contracted by the state. A company that specialized in transportation and had access to large cargo vehicles. The kind that could tow, relocate, or bury something. She started digging into Vincent Lane and learned he'd vanished in the early 2000s after an internal investigation into missing federal funds. It was hushed up, never fully investigated. Emma suspected there was more. She cross-referenced dates, contracts, and land purchases, and found something chilling. Vincent Lane had quietly purchased a small parcel of forest just a mile from where the bus was discovered. It had since been sold off and buried under a fake name. But at the time of the disappearance, he owned it. Suddenly, the theory shifted. What if the disappearance wasn't just a tragedy or a cover-up? What if it was part of something bigger, something that involved money, corruption, and a plan that went horribly wrong? Then came the most unexpected twist of all. An anonymous package arrived at Emma's door. No return address. Inside, a photograph, faded and cracked. 15 children. The same 15. But the photo wasn't from 1986. It was dated 1988. 2 years after they were last seen. Emma's hands trembled as she turned it over. On the back, written in messy block letters, were 4 words. They were still alive. Emma stared at the photo for hours, her mind racing. If the children were still alive in 1988, then everything, the search, the grief, even the buried bus, was part of a much larger lie. She took the photo to forensics through a trusted contact, who confirmed it hadn't been tampered with. The date stamp was real. The image showed the children wearing different clothes than they had the day they disappeared, and behind them was a concrete wall with part of a logo that matched an old state-run youth facility, one that had been shut down quietly in the late 80s. That facility was never mentioned in any of the original investigation files. Emma drove straight there. The property had long been abandoned, overtaken by weeds and silence. She managed to find a basement entrance pried open by time and decay. Inside, scattered across the floor, were scraps of paper, broken toys, and what looked like logbooks. Most were too damaged to read, but one had a list of names, 15 names. All the missing children. Next to some of them, a single word, transferred. Others were marked, deceased. But 3 names had no status at all. Just a blank space. The truth began to take shape, piece by horrifying piece. The bus had never crashed. The children had never died that day. They had been taken, relocated under the cover of a fake field trip. Hidden in a facility tied to Vincent Lane's logistics company, likely used in an illegal operation that exploited children for state grant funding. When the heat from investigations grew too intense, the children were moved or silenced. The buried bus had been a distraction. A manufactured ending meant to stop people from asking more questions. Emma went public with everything: documents, the photo, the facility, even her own investigation notes. It exploded across the media. Former officials denied involvement, but the evidence was too overwhelming. A federal inquiry was launched. Arrests were made. Lucas Dalka disappeared soon after, leaving only a note: "I tried to stop them. I failed." But just when the story seemed to have reached its end, another call came. A woman in her 40s claimed to be Sarah Wallace, Emma's sister. She said she had escaped from a private home in Utah 3 months earlier, after seeing the photo on the news. DNA later confirmed it. She was telling the truth. Sarah remembered very little. Just that they were separated, kept under different names, always moved when someone asked too many questions. Of the other 14 children, she had seen only a few before they were taken away one final time. The story didn't end with the truth, it ended with a reunion. One that carried the weight of nearly 4 decades. And yet, even in that moment of closure, one question still echoed louder than the rest. How many others were taken, and never brought back? The return of Sarah Wallace changed everything. Her voice gave weight to decades of speculation, filling in blanks that had haunted the town of Maple Creek for nearly 40 years. She wasn't the same girl who had boarded the yellow school bus that morning in 1986. Her memories were scattered, shaped by fear, manipulation, and years of being told who she was not. But certain details stuck: certain rooms, faces, and the repeated instructions never to speak about the past. Authorities moved fast after her story came forward. Several more facilities connected to Vincent Lane's former company were quietly reopened and searched. Some were empty, long cleared out. Others still held files, lists of children, forged consent forms, fake guardianship documents. It became clear that the 1986 field trip was not an isolated case. It had been part of a broader operation, masked under government-funded youth care programs, quietly benefiting corrupt officials and private contractors. The federal investigation led to more arrests. Records from the shuttered facility where Sarah had been held revealed a disturbing paper trail of falsified transportation logs, doctored medical records, and misused state funds. Vincent Lane was never found. Some believed he had died years ago. Others whispered he was still alive, living under a different name, protected by the same system he helped build. Of the original 15 children, only 3 were confirmed alive, including Sarah. The second was a boy named Calvin Brooks, now living under an assumed name in Nevada. He had been adopted into a private home and remembered almost nothing of the bus, just that one day he stopped being Calvin and started answering to a new name. The third was never publicly identified, choosing to remain anonymous. The rest were never located. Some likely died during the years of disappearance. Others were still a question mark. For Emma, the truth didn't bring peace, it brought responsibility. She stayed in Maple Creek, helping organize a memorial that honored the 15 children and the decades of pain their families endured. The school, now rebuilt after being closed for years, added a permanent plaque and named a new library after the missing students. Every year on the anniversary of the disappearance, people gathered to remember, not just the tragedy, but the strength of those who kept searching for answers when everyone else gave up. Emma's story sparked a national conversation about accountability, forgotten children, and institutional cover-ups. News outlets dubbed it the Maple Creek Scandal, and it became the subject of multiple documentaries and investigations. More whistleblowers came forward, and lawmakers were pressured to strengthen oversight of state-funded youth programs and foster care systems. New legislation passed, bearing the names of the children who had vanished. Sarah chose to stay close to Emma. Their reunion wasn't perfect, it couldn't be. But it was real. They spent long hours talking, filling in the years with bits and pieces. Sometimes there were tears. Sometimes laughter. But mostly, it was quiet moments, walking by the school, visiting the places they once knew, trying to reclaim the time that had been taken. For the town of Maple Creek, the buried bus was no longer just a symbol of what was lost. It became a reminder of what had been hidden, what had been allowed to happen when no one was watching. In the months that followed, crews carefully unearthed it completely and placed it in a nearby museum alongside a timeline of the investigation. Visitors came from across the country to learn about the case that had once been forgotten. Still, not every question found an answer. The name of the person who ordered the original operation was never confirmed. Files pointed to a small circle of people, but the chain of command remained murky. Some suspected the truth had been buried just as deeply as the bus, hidden under layers of bureaucracy, fear, and silence. But the most powerful truth had already been revealed: those children didn't just disappear. They were taken. Hidden. And for years, no one wanted to believe it. That realization cut deep. But it also lit a fire in the hearts of others, survivors, families of the missing, and everyday people who had always felt something wasn't right about the stories they'd been told. In time, Emma published a book, Buried Truths, detailing her investigation, the corruption she uncovered, and the personal journey that took her from a grieving sister to a voice for the voiceless. It became a bestseller, not for its drama, but because of its humanity. She didn't write it for fame. She wrote it for Sarah, for the other families, and for every child who had ever vanished without an explanation. Her final chapter was simple. It read: "They were never lost. They were taken. And they deserve to be remembered, not just for what happened to them, but for how long we refused to see it. May we never look away again." In the end, the mystery that haunted a small town for nearly 4 decades was no longer just about a missing school bus. It was about how silence can become a shield for the guilty. How systems meant to protect can be used to disappear people. And how, sometimes, the truth waits in the dirt for the right person to dig it up. And as for that last unexpected twist, the one no one could have seen coming, it was this: just a month after the book was released, another package arrived at Emma's home. No note. No name. Just a single photograph. This time, it was a girl Emma didn't recognize. Standing in front of the same wall from the earlier photo. The date stamp: 1993. The photo was older now, blurry around the edges. But in the corner, scribbled faintly in red ink, were the same chilling words. She was still alive. And just like that, the story wasn't over.